Good morning. I'm Amy Morris.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
We begin with developments on the fourth indictment of Donald Trump. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis has proposed a trial date of March 4th and to hold arraignments for defendants the week of September 5th. A number of Republicans are withholding or deflecting criticism of the former president. Georgia Republican Representative Buddy Carter tells us he thinks the latest indictment is politically motivated.
This latest indictment, this is ridiculous. Here we've got a former president indicted for the fourth time by a justice system that's weighed against him. This indictment in Georgia is not about justice. It's about revenge. And there are 159 counties in the state of Georgia. If I had not known where this one was coming from, I would have guessed. I would have said, hey, I bet it's Fulton County. And it is Fulton County because Fulton County has long been a bastion for Democratic shenanigans in the state of Georgia.
Georgia Representative Buddy Carter was a guest on Bloomberg's Balance of Power, speaking with Anne-Marie Hordern and Joe Matthew. You can catch that program weekdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Television.
Well, Amy, we turn from politics now to Hawaii. Officials still determining the lives lost and economic impact of the wildfires that ripped through Maui. Harrowing stories from the disaster are also coming to light. This man jumped into the ocean to escape the flames.
We had no warning. We had nowhere to go, no warning at all. It was just complete chaos in the streets and people were burning alive.
And the cause of the fire is still under investigation, but we're seeing continued pressure on the power company at the center of it all. Hawaiian Electric Industries faces a new lawsuit blaming its equipment for starting the blazes. Witnesses say some of Hawaiian Electric's power poles blew over during an August 8th storm. They allege that downed power lines ignited grass fires that quickly mushroomed.
And with Hawaiian Electric losing half its market value in the wake of those fires, it is exposing a liability to an already vulnerable regional bank. Hawaiian Electric owns and operates American Savings Bank, which has been grappling with regional banking turmoil from earlier this year. The wildfire may force the bank to set aside more in provisions for bad loans. That's according to a Wells Fargo analyst.
Well, we turn to the markets now, Amy, and we got minutes from the July Fed meeting yesterday, and it's fanning concerns that the central bank will continue to raise interest rates. The minutes showed Fed officials see upside inflation risk that may merit more tightening. Stephen Stanley is chief U.S. economist at Santander U.S. Capital Markets.
I have one more hike coming in November, but I think we're getting close. I think the big theme now is how long are they going to have to stay on hold? At this point, I think the markets are in a big hurry to transition from no move to easing, and I just don't think the Fed is going to be that quick.
And Stephen Stanley with Santander says the Fed is staying more hawkish than markets had expected.
Meantime, savings accounts for many Americans are dwindling, according to a study from the San Francisco Fed, saying many U.S. consumers have almost depleted those excess savings. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter brings us that story.
These excesses built up during the pandemic, but the Fed says they will probably be exhausted in the current quarter. This has been a key support for consumer spending that has boosted the U.S. economy this year. Estimates are now showing household disposable income is lower. Now, while personal consumption is still higher than it was previously reported in the fourth quarter of last year. But the diminishing savings, it says, is consistent with a slowdown in consumption on the horizon and increased price sensitivity. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ed, thanks. So we could get more insight on the U.S. consumer this morning when Walmart reports earnings. We get more from Bloomberg's Simone Foxman.
Evercore ISI says they could see a beat and a raise here, even as shares near all-time highs. Walmart benefiting from a consumer that increasingly is trading down, especially on staples like food and other grocery items.
And Bloomberg's Simone Foxman says yesterday's results from TJ Maxx and Target show consumers are still spending, but they're also hunting for bargains.
Shares of Cisco are higher this morning, up 2% in pre-market after a solid earnings report. Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet with those details.
Cisco is the largest maker of computer networking equipment. On a conference call with analysts, CEO Chuck Robbins pointed to a shift to more subscription-based services, which are expected to be more reliable than Cisco's traditional business selling network hardware. The company also said it is committed to increasing share repurchases and buybacks, and Cisco says it is taking advantage of the surge in generative artificial intelligence. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thanks. In geopolitics this week, Argentina finds itself at the center of turmoil. The country's leading presidential candidate says he plans to close the country's central bank if elected. In an exclusive interview with Bloomberg, Javier Milei says he'll slash public spending if he wins and made light of the role played by the central bank.
Well, what you do with the building is a problem of what you decide to do with it. It's a metaphor. What I'm saying is that the institution doesn't exist anymore.
And that's Argentina presidential candidate Javier Milei speaking through a translator. If elected, he also says he would freeze relations with China. This is Bloomberg.
All right, thank you, Karen. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Amy. As we mentioned earlier, the search is ongoing in Maui, where at least 110 people are known dead. Bloomberg's Nancy Lyons has more on the government's latest update on the Hawaiian disaster.
FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell says the images the world is seeing of the fire devastation in Maui cannot fully convey what the people of the island are going through.
It's the level of devastation from this fire and the feeling of loss from such a culturally rich community that was really palpable everywhere that I went.
Criswell is back in Washington after overseeing operations in Maui. She says about 700 federal personnel are still on the ground there, helping search and rescue teams look for victims. In Washington, I'm Nancy Lyons, Bloomberg Daybreak.
A former campaign aide to embattled New York Congressman George Santos is now facing federal charges. According to a new indictment, Samuel Mealy of New York was a campaign fundraiser linked to the Republican representative. Mealy is accused of impersonating a staffer of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy while contacting donors for Santos. He's charged with wire fraud in the same federal courthouse in which Santos is charged with fraud. A Texas woman was arrested after allegedly sending a racist and threatening voicemail to federal judge Tanya Chutkan, who is assigned to the special counsel election conspiracy case against former President Trump. Abigail Jo Schrei also allegedly used racist slurs and threats against Democrats in Congress and the LGBTQ community. Attorneys for the Tui family, made famous in the movie The Blind Side, fired back against allegations they exploited former NFL star Michael Orr for financial gain. The family disputes Orr's claim that he recently learned that he had been tricked into signing a document making them his legal conservators after they took him in when he was a homeless teenage football player. The Tuis say Orr knew about the arrangement and even wrote about it in his own book years ago. The Tuis' attorney, Randall Fishman.
This is somebody they treated as a son who has made public these allegations that are just ludicrous.
The Tuis say Orr's claims are all about a shakedown. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts over 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Amy.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Time now for our Bloomberg Sports Update. For that, we bring in John Stashower. Good morning,
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, good morning, Amy. Quite a week for the Atlanta Braves. They dismantled the Mets and then did likewise against the Yankees. At Citi Field, they took 3 of 4, and those 3 wins were by a combined score of 34-3. And then they went home and swept the Yankees by a combined 18-3. They won 2-0, their 4th shutout over those last 7 games. Charlie Morton and the Atlanta bullpen teaming on a 4-hitter with 13 strikeouts. Eddie Rosario, an early 2-run homer. The loss is the Yanks' 5th in a row, and it drops them under 500. First time this season, first time this point in a season since 1995. They did make the playoffs that season. That is extremely unlikely to happen this year. But Aaron Boone, even in his darkest times ever, the optimist.
We got nothing but ourselves to fix it and get going, and that's what we're going to continue to try to do. We're going to continue to come to work and work our butts off and try and get it rolling and hopefully get a streak going and starting at home on Friday.
Yeah, Boone's been saying all those things for a while now. Mets, meanwhile, beat the Pirates 8-3. 2 home runs for DJ Stewart. Pete Alonso with his 36th of the year. Mets hit 8 homers in the 3-game series. Dodgers won their 10th game in a row last night. In the current episode of HBO's Hard Knocks, Jets coach Rob Saleh shown laying into poor play by the Jets offensive line yesterday in a joint practice with Tampa Bay. That line, which is without 3 starters, let Aaron Rodgers get sacked 6 times. Rodgers called the line play a work in progress. A fight broke out in the workout. Jets assistant Tony Oden hurt his knee trying to break it up. Saleh called it friendly fire. Oden had to be carted off, taken to the hospital. John Stash Hour, Bloomberg Sports.
From coast to coast, from New York to San Francisco, Boston to Washington, D.C., nationwide on SiriusXM, the Bloomberg Business app, and Bloomberg.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And good Thursday morning. I'm Amy Morris. Republicans have ramped up their campaigns in Iowa. This is ahead of next week's Republican presidential debate. Some, though, are finding themselves on a political tightrope. That's thanks to, believe it or not, an unemployment rate that's below the national average in Iowa. We're joined now by Greg Vallier, Chief U.S. Policy Strategist at AGF Investments. Greg, it is always a pleasure. Let's start with a problem that may not be unique to Iowa, and it's a different kind of problem to have. They need more workers. There's a labor shortage, which means immigration is going to be a tough topic for Republicans on the debate stage. What say you?
Well, good morning, Amy. You're singing my song. I've been saying for over a year that one of the big economic problems in the U.S. is a lack of workers. We have an acute shortage in much of the country. Immigration reform would help that, but there's no immigration reform pending in Congress. So this will continue as a big problem.
Now, Donald Trump, meanwhile, has said he's going to be sitting this particular debate out. We've been hearing this for several weeks now. Is this wise?
Well, if you're ahead by as much as he is, yeah, I'd say it's probably wise. You don't want any unforced errors. But I have a hunch, Amy, that on the debate night, Donald Trump will find some way to inject himself into the limelight. He'll have a speech. He'll make some outrageous comment. I don't think he'll let the debate go by without attracting some attention to him.
Well, and to that end, there is speculation about timing for Donald Trump, that he might consider turning himself into Georgia in time to steal the thunder from his rival Republicans on the debate stage. Is there anything to that?
Yeah, I think that all bets are off. He's a master showman. He's phenomenal at self-promotion, and I don't think he'll let the day go by without getting in the limelight in one way or another, and what you suggest is possible.
The prosecutor in Atlanta, meanwhile, we've been talking about that this morning, has a timeline: arraignments the week of September 5th, the trial to begin by March 4th. First of all, is that realistic? Secondly, don't defense attorneys get an opportunity to have a say in that? And third, why so fast?
Well, I think they would like to keep this in the limelight, and the main point I would make about Atlanta, about Georgia, is that this will take way over a year. Here we are now and getting into late August. I think that maybe the trial will have begun by then, but I think there almost certainly will be appeals. Another thing Trump is very good at is appealing legal decisions. It could be 2025 before all 4 of these huge cases are resolved, and it's not out of the question if Trump should win, and he and Biden are about tied, Trump could serve as president in jail.
No. Okay, so I don't want to shift gears on that note, but I think we have to. We need to look at the GOP and what you've been seeing. It doesn't look very much like a recession. That's also something you've been talking about.
Yeah, that's another big development this summer. I would say that the story that I think has caught the markets by surprise is how strong the economy is. The Atlanta Fed GDP now is out this morning with a new forecast for this quarter of economic growth of 5.8%. I don't think we'll get that high. I think they're unrealistic. But even if it's at 4%, this is an economy that is far exceeding expectations.
Now, let's talk then about President Biden, who has been touting his Inflation Reduction Act. And this is one of the things that he says is a product of that. Is that accurate?
I think he needs to get he deserves some credit, but the public is still nervous about inflation with good reason. Gasoline prices are going back up again, and while the economy is red hot, I think it would be premature to declare victory on inflation. So that continues to hurt Biden's prospects.
He's also going to be going to Hawaii on Monday. He faced a lot of criticism before making this announcement. Is that going to be enough?
Well, it's important, I think, for him to show some empathy for this horrible tragedy, and I think it might help him a bit. But for him, it really boils down to the economy and inflation, and maybe to a certain extent Hunter Biden. But I think most voters care far more about the economy.
Got about 30 seconds here before he goes to Hawaii. He'll be at Camp David. He's got an international summit with Japan and South Korea. What are you watching for?
I think there may be a statement at the end of this talking about more cooperation, but I don't see any bombshells. I don't see any big, huge development coming out of this summit.
You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, Sirius XM Channel 119, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Amy Morris.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.